Hello, everybody. Welcome to the RPA Vanguard channel. My name is Andy Menon. In this video, we are going to be talking about how to install a UiPath app as a client on your desktop using the Electron framework. So let's get started. If you have watched any of the videos on the UiPath app data context, you will recall that I had deployed the single page app as a client on my laptop. I wanted to make a video on this subject for a while, and I think this is the right time for me to share with my audience on how this could be done. So now that I have brought up the Electron framework, I wanted to talk about it briefly, and I hope to pique the interest of the audience, just in case you would want to explore this framework further. So basically what Electron is, it's a framework wherein you can build applications using JavaScript, HTML, and CSS. And in that process, what you do is you also embed the Chromium and Node.js into its binary distribution, right? So what happens is with a single code base, it allows you to deploy your apps, any kind of app. It doesn't have to be a UiPath app, but it can be any other kind of application to a desktop environment, regardless of which kind of a desktop it is, right? It can be Windows, it can be Linux or Mac, right? So if you go through the basics of Electron, one of the things that you will come across is the Chrome comic. Chromium process is something that you might want to understand if you want to explore this further. But I found this Chrome comic pretty interesting. So if you click on this link, it will take you to this page here. And this is the Google comic. It's an interesting read, and I would encourage my audience to check this out. It's about 40 pages long, but it's fun to read. And I'm going to list out some of the points that I gathered from reading this document or this comic. And I really don't want to get into the details and spoil the fun for you guys. So I would love for you to go and read this. And here are some of the topics that I came across. But it will give you an overview of how Google kind of built their browser for the modern web. So what I have done here is, after reading all of this, I have gathered my thoughts on this whiteboard, right? And this is how I understand it in my head. So very briefly, on the right, you see this UiPath app, and it has already been deployed to your automation cloud. So if you're already familiar with the concept of apps, we know that we have to deploy it to the automation cloud before it can be made available to your audience, right? And that app comes with a URL, right? A published app URL. And on the left is your operating system. This is your desktop, right? And it can be a Windows, Mac, or a Linux desktop. So what Electron Framework does is it surrounds your app with this environment where it puts in some of its core modules, right? And the core modules, as you will see when we set up Electron to distribute our app, some of the main modules are the app module, the browser window module, and the global shortcut module, right? So with the help of these modules, what it does is it creates a container for your app, and your app runs inside an operating system neutral environment, right? So it does not have first-hand knowledge of what your operating system is, and yet your app will be deployed to your desktop and it will run in your desktop, right? And in case of the UiPath app, the app runs with the help of the published app URL, right? And we'll be looking at all of this and how all of these modules will fit into the picture once we get into the setup, right? So that's pretty much how I have understood how Electron works. And now that I have blabbed enough about the Electron framework, let's get into the core of today's video, and that is to install the UiPath app as a client on our desktop. All right, so let's start with the prerequisites that you will need before you start packaging up UiPath apps for distribution. The first thing that you will need is Node.js, right? So you will need to install Node.js version 14 or above. Now this matters, and I will tell you later in this video why. And along with Node, you will have to install npm. So if you are using Windows or Mac OS, then you can go straight away to the Node.js download site, and then you can download the LTS installer. And when you install Node, npm is also installed along with it, right? So if we go to this site, you can see that there is the LTS installer. And you can download the LTS installer for your flavor of the operating system and install Node and npm. Right. Now, the third and the most important thing is you will need to add Node.js to your path variable, right? This will enable you to run Node.js and npm from pretty much anywhere on your machine, right? So once we do that, we can test out our installation to make sure that Node and npm are working from pretty much anywhere on the system. So for that, we go into command prompt and notice that this is not the path for the Node installation. So what we do now is first check the npm version, and I'll tell you why. So I go to npm and I say version. And there it is. So this proves that npm is accessible. And here you can see the version of npm, which is 8.3.1, and also the version of Node, right? So Node is version 16.14. If I run my second check, and that is Node -v, you can see that this is the same version number that is output by the npm version check, right? And the other way of looking at the npm version is you type npm help, and this line will show you the version of npm. Here it is npm at 8.3.1, which is the same number that you saw when you ran the node, the npm version command, right? npm 8.3.1. So once you run this check, you know that you will be pretty much able to run npm and Node from anywhere on your system under the currently logged in user, right? So this is the first thing that you will have to do in order to get started. And now we move on to the second set of requirements, and these are what I call as the UiPath side of things. The first thing you will need is a UiPath app that's tested and deployed to the automation cloud, right? So you need to test your app in all respects. You need to deploy it once you know it is performing its intended function. And then you must be able to get its publish URL, right? So if I go to my App Studio, this is my published app, and you can see that it has a stamp named publish, and only apps that are published will have an app URL, right? Or a published URL. So here you can copy the publish URL and keep it handy because we'll need it later. That's the second thing that you will need to do. So one of the things that we haven't talked about exactly here is where to get Electron from, right? We have been talking about Electron, but where do we get it from? The straightforward way is to go and download Electron from their Electron website, but that's not what you're going to do here. What you will be doing instead is going to GitHub, right? And you will be downloading this folder named apps client sample, right? UiPath has done a great job of packaging everything that we need to get started in this client sample folder. So once you pull it down on your machine, it goes without saying that you have to download and unzip that somewhere convenient on your desktop, right? This is the third thing that we'll be doing. The next item on the list is optional. You will need your UiPath assistant connected to the instance of the orchestrator where your app is hosted, only if your app is going to trigger an automation on the client machine. Otherwise, if your app is working with other UiPath automation cloud features, such as data service entities, storage buckets, queues, etc., then you will most likely not need to be connected via Assistant to the automation cloud. So I just put this slide together to just clarify what goes where, right? So the first thing that we'll need is the published UiPath app, right? It's hosted in the automation cloud, and you have the published app URL. Then we'll need to install Node.js, Electron, and NPM on a machine that I call the producer machine. Basically, it's a machine that produces the distributable that you're later going to install on a client machine, right? So it should not be misunderstood that all the parts that I've just talked about, right, about setting up Node, setting up Electron or NPM must be repeated on every client machine. No, we'll have to install these pieces here, Node plus Electron plus NPM, on the producer machine. And then on the producer machine, we produce the distributable that will be then sent over to the clients, and the clients will then use the distributable to install the exe, right? That will then host your UiPath app, right? So we have primarily three pieces here: the automation cloud, where the app is hosted; the producer machine that produces the distributable and where all your infrastructure is set up; and then finally, the consumer machine or the client machine, where the distributable is used to install the exe for your app. So, okay, everybody, I'm going to be going in the order of the prerequisites that I discussed in the previous section. And what we'll be doing is going through these items one by one and make sure that they have been covered. So with that, what we have done is first install Node.js version 14 plus. And we also have installed NPM, which is part of the Node.js installation. And the third item on the list is to add the path, the installation path to Node.js to the path variable. And this is a Windows machine. So all the steps that I'm going to show you are applicable to the Windows machine. One way to inspect the path variable is to type echo %path%. And then from the output, we can check to see if the path to Node.js is in this path variable. So here we can see that this path here exists in the path variable, right? So with that, we have taken care of these three items on this list of prerequisites. So moving on to the next list of the UiPath prerequisites, we start with item number one. Here, we require some amount of work to be done. And in the interest of time, I've already done this work. Switching to the UiPath Studio, what I have done is I've taken the app that you saw in my previous videos on data context, and I have cloned it, and I have given it a new name. And the new name is ending with desktop client, just for the purposes of this demo. This is the new version of the app, and it hasn't been published yet. But if I go to the app that has already been installed as a desktop client on my machine, I just want you to see the changes that I have made to the new version. So first off, I want to eliminate this clear button. That's the first change. And the second change is I do not really like the look of this new response button, because users really cannot see it. I myself have questioned the appearance of this button after running through this app several times. I want to assign the styling of the clear button to this new response button so that it will stand out a little more, right? That is the second change. And then the third change will be in this form here. Clicking on the new response form, if you look at the buttons, here again, the clear button is sort of overwhelming the submit button. What I want to do with this button is that I want to take the styling of this button, the new response button that you see in the background here, and assign it to the clear button. So this is the other change that I want to make. The third and the least significant change that I want to make is to change the title of this app. I want to add the fact that this is a desktop client. And then the final change that I'm going to make will be going back to the main page. This page is pretty drab, so I want to kind of fill this with something other than just a single line, right? So these are the sum total of changes that I have already made to the new version of this application, right? And from the changes, you can already figure out that the nature of the changes doesn't require us to spend too much time on the testing, because the nature of the change is much more superficial and not really affecting the functionality of this app, right? So with that, I'm going to switch over to App Studio. And here we are back to the design of the new version of the app. This is a clone of the app I just showed you. And going by the changes, I have the title changed. And I have made the other changes as well. So what I'll be doing is opening the app directly in preview so that we can walk through the changes. So here is the page. It obviously has my company's website and logo. And then this link that you previously saw will take us to the actual single page application. And here you can see now that the new response button is a little more appealing than it previously was. And again, based on what we discussed previously, the clear button is gone. Finally, if I click on the new response button, looking at the clear button, it's a bit more diminished compared to the submit button. Finally, you can look at the title of the single page application. I have appended desktop client to the title so that we can differentiate between this app here, which is the older version demonstrated in my previous videos on data context, and the newer version that you see here. So the next step for me is to publish this app. My app has been published. Going back to Studio, here is the app. And what I'll be doing is copying the app publish URL. I have created a folder named UiPath Apps Distro under the public documents. And under the app distro folder, I have something called RPA Vanguard assets. So I'm going to record the app publish URL for the next steps. Save the file. So going back to our list of prerequisites, the UiPath app has been tested and deployed to the automation cloud. And I have also recorded the publish URL of the deployed app. Now, the next step for us is to go after the Electron startup kit. And for that, I'm going to go to this URL here. So this is the UiPath GitHub page, and I have downloaded the Electron starter kit using the download zip option. So once you download that zip file, what you can do is move it to a convenient location on your computer. In this case, my working folder is UiPath Apps Distro, and the name of the zip is Apps Client Sample Master. Once you extract it, the extracted folder will also have the same name. So please do take a note of the contents of this folder. Once we run npm commands to install Electron, then the contents of this folder will change. So we have pulled down the Electron startup kit from GitHub. So the fourth bullet item in my case is optional. That is because the nature of the app that I'm going to publish is that it does not trigger an automation. Instead, it works directly with the UiPath data service. So I'm already in the apps client sample master folder. I'm going to copy the path to this folder and switch to the command prompt. And please do remember two things. You will have to run everything inside of this folder. And the second thing is, please do not run these commands with your command prompt set to administrator mode. Please do it with the normal user mode, right? So these are the two things that you have to remember. And also going back to the previous discussion, because you have added the path to Node.js to the path environment variable, you should be able to run node and npm from any folder on this machine. So I'll be switching to this sample master folder in the command prompt. The first command that we are going to run on this folder is npm install. Okay, so we are back to where we left off. And if you look at the command prompt, you will see that the npm install command has successfully completed. And one of the things that I would like to draw your attention to is the contents of the app's client sample master folder after npm install has completed. So if we get into the folder here, you will see that the node modules folder is something that has been added. And if you click on node modules, you will see many number of Electron dependencies in this folder. For example, here is at Electron. And then if you scroll down, you will see utilities such as Electron Builder and also the Electron module, and several other Electron framework components that are added as part of the npm install, right? Now, the second thing that I would like to draw your attention to is the command prompt results themselves. There are no warnings other than something related to npm and node that you might want to audit and update certain packages based on their risk level, right? Other than that, you do not see any major failures. But this is where I would like to go back to the discussion on why the version of Node matters. So I'm going to pull up this screenshot that I captured from a few months ago. One of the things that I learned is if you ignore any of these warnings here, you will face failures downstream. You will see at the very end, things will fall apart if you do not take a moment to understand these errors, right? So the first thing that npm tried to tell me is that I'm having an unsupported node engine required for Electron Builder 22.14.13, right? It needed node greater than or equal to 14. And that is why I said that the version matters and you need to have node version 14 or higher installed, right? But if you have already installed the latest version of Node or already have the latest version of Node that is exceeding version 14, then you will see an output similar to this, right? So with this, what we have effectively done is install Electron.js, right? And the infrastructure that is required for you to publish an app as a distributable, right? Okay, the first step for me is to replace the icon with the file of my choosing, right? So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to back up this file. And I'm going to move this icon file into this folder here. And now I have replaced the icon file with the file of my choosing. This is the first step. Now, the second step would be to update the main.js file. Now, if you remember this illustration from the beginning of the video, we will be looking at these modules here, the app, the browser window, global shortcut modules, and you will see how all of these fall into place in the main.js file. Here is the file, and it starts with the modules that are required by Electron, right? So here is the module app, browser window, and global shortcut. And now the next thing that we want to be doing is to change the URL to match the published production URL of our app. I'm going to delete this line here, and I'm going to go back to the folder where my assets are, pick up my production URL of the published app, come back to main.js. So I have replaced this runtime URL with my own, right? So the next step is to look at this code a little bit and understand what it is doing. When you talk about the main window, that reference is held by an object here called main window. So going back to the illustration here, we are talking about this window in green. That is the window of your executable inside which your app is going to be hosted, right? So we are creating a reference to that. And then we are defining the parameters of this window, right? And what this does is it determines the width and height of the screen where the app is actually working. Now, you could also update the main window attributes. Note that here you have main window that's declared as an object reference, and you can specify how that window is going to look like, right? So here is the width and height. And then please do take note that you have to change the title. Otherwise, it's not going to be relevant to the app that you are actually deploying. So good. The next thing would be to fix the top left position of where your window is going to open. I'm going to leave it at default. And if you want your app to be always on top, right, then you set this to true. In most real world working conditions, that will not be true unless you are having an app in a call center where it always has to be the primary focus of attention. So you don't have to set this to true, but if you require it, you can set this attribute to true. The other thing is the resizable attribute. If you want your window to be expanded to fill the screen, then set it to true. I require the window to be resizable based on the demos you've seen earlier. Similarly, I would want my window to be movable, which is true, right? And if you do not want a frame, then you set this to false, but I require a frame. I like it that way. So I'm going to keep it at true. So also to note is the icon that's going to be assigned to the top left part of the window is going to be the icon that you just replaced with your own choosing, right? So that will be the icon that will be assigned to your window, right? So now what we have done is we have, in a sense, specified the attributes of the main window, which is this box here, this box in blue, right? And in that process, we also have covered the browser window module and how it fits in this entire scheme of things. And then this is where we invoke the global shortcut module. And what this global shortcut module allows you to do is it allows you to register keyboard shortcuts and then handle those keyboard shortcuts to perform different kinds of actions, right? And some of them have already been done for you by default. Here, for example, on a Mac, it's Command plus Shift plus R. On a Windows, it is Control plus Shift plus R. So if you have these command key combinations, then it is going to reload the window. Similarly, if you have Control Alt X, you are going to quit the app, right? The app is going to close, right? And then finally, there is this closed function or the closed event handler. And what this does is it is going to unregister all of the registered keyboard shortcuts on that window because in the previous line, we're setting that window to null, right? So what you have done upstream, you are undoing when the user closes the app, right? So this covers the global shortcut module. Now we move on to the app module. And the app module is obviously the reference to the entire exe application. And what happens is when the app is ready, the create window function is called. And if we remember from the previous lines upstream, we have the create window function here. This is the function that creates that window within the app, right? So in this schematic, this is the window, this is the app, and within the app, this window is created, right? The green box is created, right? Here again, if all windows of that app are closed, right? Windows all are closed, there is an event handler that responds to it. And if this process platform or the operating system on which this app is running is not Apple, then we need to unconditionally quit this app. Similarly, we have another event handler on the app object, and that is when the window is activated, right? If the main window is null, obviously call the create window function, right? So these are the components of the main.js file. And we saw through the coverage of this file that we went through or accounted for all the modules that we spoke about in the schematic: app, browser window, and global shortcut. And the next step for us is to prepare the package to put all of this into, right? This is the configuration of the application. Next, we need to prepare the package into which all of these pieces will go in and form the foundation for your distributable. I'm back in the apps client sample master folder, and the next file we are going to be looking at is the package.json. And I already have it open in Notepad. And this is the structure of the package.json file. The first thing that I'll be doing is to change the name of the package. So I'm going to set it to UiPath Apps Data Service SPA. And I'm also going to say client. And then I'm going to change the title. I'm going to say RPA Vanguard. You're telling the package that it has to package up the icon.png and then the main.js here. And then here you see the other scripts that need to be packaged in your distribution. And they all are associated with the Electron framework. The other thing that you might want to notice is the app ID and the product name. Please do change the name of your app ID to something that is relevant to your app. So I'm going to say com.uipath. And I'm going to put this value here. That way I know that the name of the package matches my app ID. And it might look like it is enough to change the display name. That is not enough. You have to change the name of the product. Otherwise, what's going to happen is when you go to your start menu, the product will appear as UiPath app sample. Now you don't want that, right? You want it to appear with the name of your application. So please do change the name, and I'm going to set it to the display name. Right now, this time we published the app for the very first time, right? It was version 1.0. So I'm going to set up version 1.0.0. And that pretty much covers the package.json. And you saw how the name of the package, the dependencies that are tied to this package, namely your icon file, the main.js, the several Electron scripts, and also the application ID and the product name all come together so that you can build a distributable for this UiPath app. Okay, now that we have everything in place, right, we should be technically able to test this out by running npm, right? So let's go back to the console or the command prompt, and let's hit npm start. Remember that one of the things that you set in the main.js file is the published URL of your app. Now, what you're going to be seeing is Electron creating the app, then creating the window, assigning it the window title, and then hosting your app inside of that window, right? So here's the window now. So if you're doing this for the first time, it's going to take some time. So please be patient. So I'm going to go back to the desktop so that there is better contrast on this app. So please notice that this is the new version of the app because it has the desktop client in its title description. And also you can see that the RPA Vanguard logo has been assigned to this window. And for the first time, if you're not already logged in into the instance of the automation cloud where this app has been published to, you will need to log in. So I'm going to talk to you once I log in with my credentials. Okay, so I have logged in into the automation cloud, and here is my app. And as discussed previously, notice that the new changes that I put in have been effected, and my opening page is a lot better than it was in the previous version. And the other thing to notice is that I had set this window to be resizable. So it's up to us to decide, what the final size is going to be, but you can play around with it. But for now, I want my app to be, full screen. So if I maximize, it goes to full screen. If I follow this link here, you will see that the changes that we put in have been effected, right? So good. We have successfully set up everything that we require to deploy this app as a distributable, and also tested it to make sure it works, right? So at this point in time, we must expect everything to be good and there will be no failures, right? So this goes back to that error I was talking to you about previously. So if I bring back that error here, if you ignore this error at this point, right, you're not going to see any side effects. What's going to happen is everything is going to work. You will be able to use npm start and open this app and work with it, which will give you an impression that everything works well. But what happens is when you now package your app for distribution, that is where ignoring that error is going to cost you with a failure, right? So what I mean by that is if I run npm dist, right, the next command that I'm going to run is npm run dist, right, which is prepare the file for or prepare the app for distribution. When you do that, you are going to run into this error, right? And the problem is you won't see it until the end, right? And therefore, please do be careful about your Node.js version. In the end here on this output, you will see what the npm command output is trying to tell us, right? It is saying that this is not a problem with npm, right? But there seems to be a problem elsewhere, right? So looking at this error made me think that there might be an issue with Node, and indeed it turned out that the Node version was outdated. And when I went back to this error message and looked at it carefully, that conclusion was correct. So please do not ignore the messages that you see when you run npm install, right? Because it might cost you with a failure all the way to the end. I'm back to the command prompt and I'm inside the client sample master folder. So I will run npm run distribution. Please note that your sample master folder does not have the distribution folder yet, right? So once the distribution command runs to completion, you must be able to see the dist folder inside of the app's client sample master. And this is going to take some time to run if you're doing this for the first time. I'm going to pause the recording and come back once it's done. Okay, so we are back, and this distribution run command took about 6 to 7 minutes. And here you can see the output. The first thing that it shows us is that there is the platform indicator, which is the Win32 64-bit. And also it shows you what the output directory is, which is the dist folder. And then it also gives us the name of the exe that is being packaged for distribution. And here the name of the exe is the name of the package that you set up, or the in the package.json, and the word setup along with the version, right, followed by .exe. And because this is a Windows 64-bit machine, it has the architecture signature as x64. So as usual is the case, I'm back into the sample master folder, and here is the distribution folder ready to go. So if I go in, here is the Win unpacked folder that was indicated as output by the npm run distribution command. And here is the exe file, the application that is going to be run in order to install your desktop client on your computer. And what this does is it uses the contents of the Win unpacked folder. And here, if you look at the Win unpacked folder, here is our desktop client, and which is an application that's going to be installed. So in essence, what happens is our desktop client is completely surrounded by this Electron ecosystem, and as a result of which the app is able to run regardless of your flavor of the operating system. So what we'll be doing next is using the exe and installing this application on this machine. So for the purposes of the demonstration, I have used this machine as a consumer laptop as well. But in reality, what's going to be happening is this entire distribution folder is going to be put up in a central repository from where your users can download and install this app on their laptops, right? So with that, let me begin the installation process. So all I have to do is just double click this application. And just like that, the client installation is complete, and you can see now that this app is opening up just like a normal program on your computer, right? And if you want to find where this application is at, you go to the Start menu. And this is where you will be able to start your UiPath apps as desktop clients on your computer. Please remember that when I tested this app using npm start, I had already logged in to my instance of the automation cloud, and therefore I did not have to log in once more. So now what I want to do is I want to uninstall my older version of the application. I do not need it. So the process to do that is pretty much the same as how you would uninstall a regular program on your computer. So here is the older version, and I'm going to right click on this and say uninstall. So doing so will not uninstall your app in one stroke. What Windows is going to do is going to bring up your programs feature, and then you get to uninstall your application. So please do be careful which version of the app you're uninstalling. If you notice, this is the most recent application that I have installed, and the older application is here at this location. So I uninstall this app, and you confirm you want to uninstall it, and you're done. Before we conclude this video, I just wanted to show you one more thing. If you want to know where this app is actually installed, what you can do is query your app data folder. So you go into your file explorer, and then you go into your app folder, app data folder, which is basically your users directory followed by your login name, app data, local programs. And when you click on this URL, and when you navigate to that URL, you will find that the older version of the application and the newer version of the application are all available here. You can see that I have applications that are much older. So if I go to my latest app, and if I click on it, and here is the entire ecosystem that has been set up on your computer, installed on your computer rather, that will help host your UiPath app as a desktop client on your computer. That is all for this video, and I hope you have learned something new. If you like this content, please do like and subscribe to my channel. I'll truly appreciate it. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.